His name is Jonathan Conricus. He was a spokesman, international spokesperson for IDF. He destroyed October 7 narrative and discredited everything that we have known happened on that day. Take a listen.
Something that's been reported by the Haaretz newspaper, that the IDF, and I'm assuming you would have knowledge of this if it's true, ordered the Hannibal Directive on October the 7th to prevent Hamas taking soldiers captive. And this is something known as the Hannibal Directive, procedure or protocol, an Israeli military policy that stipulates the use of maximum force in the event of a soldier being kidnapped, the premise being that it's better to kill your own than let them be abducted and taken across the border into Gaza. Is that true?
Watch how he
hi, Piers.
destroys himself.
That report was written by the military correspondent of Haaretz, Yaniv Kubovich, and cited mostly by BDS supporters and Hamas supporters and others who have a very vested interest in minimizing the damage done and documented the carnage done by Hamas murderers on October the 7th, and trying to put the blame of the 1,200 victims in Israel on the IDF, perversely, and not on Hamas. And the bigger picture here is that it may have happened. I have heard reports about it, and I think that in general, reports written by Yaniv Kubovich are credible. He's a serious journalist, and I take it with a lot of respect, and it needs to be looked into. And at face value, I wouldn't immediately rule it out, because as you know very well, and you have reported about it as well, October 7 was the most chaotic day in Israeli history.
Okay, so before I let him speak, just want to point out, he said that Yaniv, the journalist who reported on this Hannibal Directive, where it basically says, you Israeli soldiers, do not let anybody take your people, your soldier, or civilian, Israeli civilian as hostage. The moment you see this happening, shoot them. I mean, get rid of them, because we do not want IDF or Hamas to take anybody from Israeli side to take as an hostage. So he said, this guy, Jonathan Conricus, he said, okay, I believe that story. I believe that happened. But what he will say next is something very, very contradictory. Listen.
There was absolute mayhem on the ground. Israeli defense forces were scrambling to get down south to stem the tide of Hamas death squads and Palestinian civilians who were flowing into Israel to murder, to burn, to rape, to execute, to torch buildings, and to abduct Israelis. And it makes sense that someone at military headquarters would have made such, or would have given such an order. And I know that now the IDF is on the coming Thursday, and probably after that as well, we're finally going to see the first official and publicly available after-action reviews of the IDF into the events, the horrible events of October the 7th, the mass.
Okay, so what doesn't make sense to me here is this, very, very simple. So if he believes that Hannibal Directive was used, this protocol or this procedure was used on October 7th, according to him, he believes that. Jonathan, he believes it. Then how can he at the same time, on the same tongue, claim that whatever happened October 7th, it was because of Hamas? I mean, the Hannibal Directive gave Israeli soldiers free pass to commit violence on that day when they saw people coming from Palestine, Gaza, into Israel. How can he on the same token say something like, okay, so everything happened was because of Hamas, but at the same time he's saying, no, the Hannibal Directive is also true, where they approve this violence. So Israel is committing violence, he believes that, on that day, that happened, IDF did kill people. And at the same time, he's saying that, no, it is actually Hamas who did all of this carnage and the atrocities that took place. I do not understand how can he contradict himself. Like, what he's trying to accomplish here is something very, very biased, and it really exposed him so openly. Now, take a look at this other guy. This is a he's a spokesperson, Israeli official. Do you remember this? Take a listen.
How many civilians do you believe you've killed?
we don't have exact figures, as you know, it's the fog of war.
But you've got exact numbers for
we don't run
Hamas
to
terrorists
media
you've killed. Why wouldn't you know how many civilians you've killed?
because obviously our focus is to go after the Hamas terrorists. And
so again, he's using the same rhetoric. It is Hamas terrorists, it's Hamas, Hamas. So again, on the same note, they are also saying that, well, Hannibal Directive is also true. So when I was hearing Jonathan Conricus, what he was saying, I was like, man, do you know what you're talking about? Do you really realize how you're contradicting yourself?
Massacre and the killing of Israeli civilians and the abduction of Israeli civilians. And I think we will have to wait until then to understand and to have a better picture. But very much happened on that day. It was, I think, the most challenging military situation Israel has ever faced. And I think that extreme measures were taken because there were extreme circumstances.
Okay, so let's go back with what Bassem Youssef said. U.S. is sending billions of dollars in aid for Israeli military, only to have this kind of incident where Israeli military had absolutely zero control over the situation. Does it even make any sense? It does not. But the only time it makes sense is when you allow your soldiers, your comrades, to shoot at your own people and create this carnage, commit this genocide, a mini genocide on that day. They have started this genocide in a mini way on October 7th. That is the only time we can believe that, yes, this is possible. But after receiving billions of dollars in aid, and even sometimes soldiers on the grounds, spy agents coming from UK, flying over from Germany, aid over, the package is being delivered over and over again, repeatedly, and in so many quantities, they had no scarcity of anything. IDF had everything at their disposal. And then this person, Jonathan, is saying, oh, they had no control over the situation. It was the worst day in the Israeli military history. Do you buy this BS? I don't.
To be clear, are you familiar with the Hannibal Directive then? Is this something everyone is aware of in the IDF?
I am.
And what is your understanding of what it actually means?
Yeah, so Israel, the fact that now, sadly, on the 7th of October, 252 Israelis and foreigners were abducted by Hamas into Gaza is sadly not the first time that any of our enemies try to abduct Israeli soldiers or civilians. This is something that Palestinian and other Iran-affiliated terrorist organizations have been doing for tens of years. And the protocol, or this order, is something that used to be in place in the IDF, which was designed to prevent such a catastrophe from happening, that an Israeli soldier or civilian is taken by terrorists into enemy territory. And the order isn't, as you said, to use maximum force. It is to use force that even may endanger the Israelis who are being abducted. It is not about killing Israelis. It's not about deliberately doing that. It's about using force that may even endanger Israeli civilians. And at this stage, I don't have confirmed reports from the IDF that say that this is actually what happened on the ground. But based on the reporting of Yaniv Kubovich, I think that's a trustworthy source, and it makes sense that that may have happened.
It's a very...
on his own tongue, he did admit that this is something that will endanger the life of the Israelis, right? So how can now he say, well, those people killed 1,200 were all killed by Hamas? We can debunk this in matter of just seconds, not by giving you examples from Hamas or Palestinian authorities, but by giving example from Israeli authorities themselves. They are saying loud and clear that this was done by IDF, not by Hamas, but by IDF. The majority of the people, according to Bassem Youssef, what he found after he did his investigation, 739 people were killed by IDF on October 7th. So guys, do you want to buy this propaganda, this BS PR coming from Israeli, or you don't want to? It's really up to you.
The reason I think it's so significant is that many people have been challenging the number of those who died that day and were wounded, challenging the pretext that they were all killed or wounded by Hamas, but actually as a number, and no one's put an exact number to this, but a number of people on the Israeli side who died that day and were wounded were actually killed or wounded by Israeli fire.
Absolutely.
And so the significance of this development about the Hannibal Directive, and it seems from what you're saying that you think it's highly likely it was deployed, is that it may be a number of Israelis were killed that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
You know, Piers, it may be true. It may have
true,
been
true.
in the chaotic situation on October the 7th when Palestinian death squads were roaming around southern Israel.
Again, I mean, so disgusting to hear his lies. I don't want to play the rest of the video, but he is lying over and over again, and Piers Morgan is trying to get an answer from him. Did this happen? But for Jonathan Conricus, yes, it is true, it happened. I have sources that I can trust, or I do trust, Yokovich or whatever his name is. But look, these are all done by Hamas. So I don't know how he can contradict himself on camera so many times. This is unbelievable. This BS that they are propagating, peddling, is just beyond belief.